The Amsterdam Transfer by Simon Templeton. Chapter 1. The blood on Marcus Reed's shirt wasn't his own. Not yet. He pressed against the concrete pillar in Schiphol's departure lounge, watching the FSB operatives spread through the terminal like infection through a bloodstream. 3 of them. Maybe 4. All pretending to be travelers. All carrying the same dead-eyed focus that meant someone was about to die. Marcus touched the USB drive in his jacket pocket, feeling its sharp edges through the fabric. 18 months of work, satellite footage, intercepted communications, execution videos that would make the International Criminal Court weep with rage, evidence that could topple governments or start a war depending on who controlled the narrative. A blonde woman in designer jeans lingered near the departure board, her eyes scanning faces with professional efficiency. Marcus recognized the type. Former military, probably Spetsnaz, definitely here to kill him. She caught his movement and her hand drifted toward her purse. Time to move. Marcus pushed through the crowd, his internal injuries screaming with each step. The beating in Prague had cracked something vital inside him, but he'd managed to stay ahead of them for 72 hours. Now his luck was running out, and London felt impossibly far away. He needed a courier. Someone clean, invisible, someone the Russians wouldn't suspect until it was too late. His eyes swept the terminal. Business travelers, families, gap-year students with backpacks and naive smiles. There, a man in his early 30s sat alone at a coffee shop, studying a guidebook with the focused intensity of someone who'd planned this trip for months. Tourist clothes, tourist posture, tourist problems. Perfect. Marcus approached the table, his movements casual, despite the fire spreading through his chest. The target was absorbed in his book, something about Amsterdam's museums. British, judging by the accent when he ordered his coffee. Even better. "Excuse me," Marcus said, settling into the opposite chair without invitation. "Mind if I sit? Everywhere else is taken."
"Oh, sure, no problem." The man looked up. Brown eyes, unremarkable features, the kind of face that disappeared in crowds. David something, Marcus decided. He looked like a David. Probably worked in accounting or IT. Saved for 2 years to afford this European adventure. Posted carefully cropped photos on social media to make his life seem more interesting than it was.
First time in Amsterdam?
Yeah, actually. Well, first time anywhere in Europe, really. I'm doing the whole tour. Amsterdam, Berlin, Prague, Vienna. Living the dream, you know?
If only you knew, Marcus thought. 3 of those cities had tried to kill him in the past week. Over David's shoulder, Marcus spotted movement. The blonde operative was closing in, her partner flanking from the right. A third man, tall, Slavic cheekbones, expensive suit that couldn't quite hide the shoulder holster, positioned himself near the exit. They'd found him. Marcus palmed the USB drive, his fingers slick with sweat. Everything depended on the next 30 seconds. If he could get the drive into David's possession without the FSB noticing, maybe, just maybe, the evidence would survive even if he didn't.
That's quite an itinerary. You traveling alone?
Yeah, well, my girlfriend and I broke up last month. Figured I'd do the trip anyway. Can't let a perfectly good vacation go to waste, right? Perfect. No one would miss him immediately. No one would come looking.
Marcus leaned forward, pretending to read David's guidebook while his peripheral vision tracked the approaching operatives. 15 meters and closing. The blonde had her hand inside her purse now, probably gripping a ceramic knife that wouldn't trigger metal detectors. Amsterdam's got some incredible history, Marcus said, his voice steady, despite the adrenaline flooding his system. The resistance during World War II, the way ordinary people stood up to fascists when their governments failed them.
Yeah, I read about that. Amazing what regular people can do when they have to, isn't it?
You're about to find out, Marcus thought. 10 meters. Marcus stood abruptly, pretending to stumble as he reached for his coffee. His hand brushed against David's jacket, and the USB drive slipped into the side pocket with practiced smoothness. Years of tradecraft distilled into a single fluid motion.
Sorry, bit clumsy. Long flight.
No worries. I know the feeling. The blonde operative was 5 meters away now, her eyes locked on Marcus with predatory focus.
He could see the outline of her weapon, could read the kill order in her expression. But she hadn't seen the transfer. None of them had.
Marcus checked his watch, a gesture that would look natural to surveillance cameras but was really a signal to his handler in London. If everything went according to plan, David would be on a train to Berlin within the hour, carrying the most dangerous piece of evidence in Europe without knowing it. Of course, nothing had gone according to plan since Prague.
Well, enjoy Amsterdam. And remember, sometimes the most important history gets written by people who never intended to be heroes.
Thanks. Have a safe flight.
Not likely, Marcus thought. He walked away from the table, his back straight despite the pain, leading the FSB operatives away from their unwitting courier. Behind him, David returned to his guidebook, completely unaware that his European vacation had just become something else entirely. The blonde operative followed Marcus toward the departure gates, her partner moving to cut off his escape route. They thought they had him cornered. They thought the evidence would die with him. They were half right. Marcus Reed had spent 18 months documenting Russian war crimes, building an airtight case that could bring justice to thousands of victims. Now that evidence sat in the jacket pocket of a British tourist who thought his biggest problem was choosing between the Van Gogh Museum and the Rijksmuseum. As Marcus disappeared into the crowd, the first phase of a conspiracy that would span 4 countries and cost dozens of lives was already in motion. David finished his coffee, gathered his things, and headed for the train platform, carrying secrets that powerful people would kill to protect. The Amsterdam transfer was complete. And somewhere in the terminal, the hunters were already adapting, already planning their next move in a game where David didn't even know he was a player. Chapter 2. The Watcher. David's boots echoed against the polished concrete of Amsterdam Central as he made his way toward Platform 3B. The Deutsche Bahn ICE to Berlin wouldn't depart for another 20 minutes, but he preferred the buffer. Too many missed connections in his younger days had taught him the value of punctuality. He found his reserved seat in Car 7, sliding his backpack into the overhead compartment with the careful efficiency of someone who'd spent the last 3 weeks living out of luggage. The train was filling steadily, business travelers with their laptops, backpackers with oversized packs, elderly couples consulting printed itineraries with the dedication of military strategists.
Right then, he said to himself, settling into the window seat. The familiar ritual of train travel, ticket validated, phone charged, book ready. He pulled out his worn copy of The Sleepwalkers and found his bookmark at chapter 12.
What David didn't notice was the young woman 3 rows behind him, her blonde hair now concealed under a black beanie. Her earlier predatory focus replaced by the patient stillness of a hunter in position. She'd boarded 90 seconds after him, her movements casual but purposeful. What David also didn't notice was the man across the aisle checking his phone with the mechanical precision of someone receiving orders. Dark jacket, unremarkable features, the kind of face that disappeared in crowds. His fingers moved across the screen in rapid bursts, short messages, coordinates, confirmations. The ICE pulled away from Amsterdam with German efficiency, and David watched the urban sprawl give way to flat Dutch countryside. Polders stretched to the horizon, interrupted by windmills that looked almost too perfect to be real. He'd photographed dozens of them over the past week, each shot a small victory against the relentless march of digital tourism. 3 weeks in Europe, and he was finally hitting his stride. Amsterdam had been everything the guidebooks promised. Canals like arteries through the city's heart, museums packed with centuries of human achievement, coffee shops where the real business wasn't caffeine. Tomorrow, Berlin, then Prague, Vienna, maybe Budapest if the budget held. 40 minutes into the journey, the blonde woman stood and walked toward the dining car. Her movement was fluid, practiced, the kind of grace that came from years of physical training. She passed David's row without a glance, but her reflection in the window lingered just long enough to memorize his position. The man across the aisle followed 3 minutes later, his timing too precise to be coincidental. David was absorbed in Kochler's analysis of Kepler's revolutionary astronomy, completely unaware that he'd become the center of a different kind of orbital mechanics, one where he was the unwitting satellite around which dangerous forces were aligning. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister Sarah. How's the solo adventure going? Mom's worried you'll get mugged by Dutch pickpockets.
He typed back, tell Mom, the most dangerous thing I've encountered is overpriced museum coffee. Amsterdam was brilliant. Berlin next.
If David had turned around at that moment, he might have seen the blonde woman, speaking quietly, into a satellite phone, her words lost in the train's rhythmic clatter. He might have noticed the man across the aisle, photographing his reflection in the window. He might have realized that the casual conversation with Marcus Reed at Schiphol had made him a target in a war he couldn't comprehend. Instead, he returned to his book, losing himself in the story of how Johannes Kepler had shattered humanity's comfortable assumptions about the heavens. The irony was perfect. David was reading about a man who discovered that the universe was far more dangerous and chaotic than anyone had imagined, while sitting 40 feet away from people who would kill him for carrying secrets that could reshape the modern world. A blonde woman, Anya Volkov, though David would never learn her name, returned from the dining car with a bottle of water and a predator's patience. She'd received her updated orders, surveillance only until they reached Berlin. The target was to be taken alive if possible, eliminated if he attempted to make contact with Western intelligence. A man across the aisle, Dmitry Kozlov, FSB operative with 14 confirmed kills, had received different instructions. His orders were simpler, more direct. Retrieve the package by any means necessary. The discrepancy in their commands was intentional, a failsafe built into Russian intelligence operations. If one approach failed, the other would adapt. David closed his book as the train began slowing for the German border. The countryside had shifted subtly, fewer polders, more forests, the architecture of farmhouses taking on the solid, enduring quality that seemed uniquely Germanic. He checked his phone. Still 2 hours to Berlin Hauptbahnhof. Berlin. He'd been looking forward to this stop more than any other. The history there wasn't just academic. It was visceral, written in bullet holes and graffiti, in the scars where walls had been torn down and the spaces where they'd once stood. He had 3 days to explore everything from Museum Island to the remnants of Checkpoint Charlie. What David couldn't know was that Berlin would become a hunting ground, that the next 72 hours would strip away every assumption he'd ever made about safety, about governments, about the difference between the good guys and the bad guys. The USB drive in his jacket pocket, still unnoticed, still ignored, contained footage that would make him physically sick when he finally saw it. It contained evidence that would make powerful men in Moscow and London equally desperate to silence him. As the ice crossed into Germany, David Thornton was still a tourist with a guidebook and 3 weeks of vacation ahead of him. By the time the train reached Berlin, he would be something else entirely, a courier in a shadow war, carrying secrets that would make him the most hunted man in Europe. And in the seats around him, the watchers settled in for the remainder of the journey. Their orders clear, their methods proven, their patience absolute. The game was entering its next phase, and David remained blissfully unaware that he was no longer just a player. He was the prize. Chapter 3. The ice train shuddered to a halt at Berlin Hauptbahnhof with the mechanical precision that Germans had perfected over decades. David gathered his backpack and joined the queue of passengers shuffling toward the exits, his mind already racing through the logistics of the next 3 days. Museum Island first, then the Brandenburg Gate, maybe catch a late dinner in Kreuzberg if he could find his way around the U-Bahn system. Behind him, Anya Volkov moved with the fluid grace of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. She let 6 passengers pass between herself and David, close enough to maintain visual contact, far enough to avoid suspicion. Her earpiece crackled with static as she stepped onto the platform.
Target is mobile. Platform 7, moving toward the main concourse.
The response came in rapid Russian, orders that would have chilled David's blood if he'd understood then. Maintain distance. Asset Kozlov will establish overwatch from the mezzanine level. Do not engage unless target attempts contact with authorities. David emerged into the vast cathedral of glass and steel that was Berlin's central station, momentarily overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it. The building rose in layers above him, tracks and platforms stacked like some impossible architectural layer cake. He pulled out his phone and opened the Maps app, trying to orient himself toward his hotel. Dmitry Kozlov was already in position on the upper level, his trained eyes tracking David's movement through the crowd below. The FSB had taught him to read body language like a language, and everything about the target screamed civilian. The way he hesitated at intersections, checked his phone every 30 seconds, looked around with the wide-eyed fascination of a tourist seeing everything for the first time. Amateur, soft. This will be over in hours once we get the order. David made his way through the station's labyrinthine passages, following signs toward the S-Bahn. His hotel was near Alexanderplatz, a 15-minute ride through the heart of what had once been East Berlin. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was staying in the former communist sector, carrying secrets that would have made him a high-value target for the Stasi 30 years ago. He didn't notice the blonde woman who boarded the same S-Bahn car 2 doors down. He didn't see the man with the Slavic cheekbones who took a seat with perfect sight lines to the entire compartment. David was too busy staring out the window, watching the city unfold in layers of history, bombed-out churches preserved as monuments, gleaming new office towers rising beside buildings still pockmarked with bullet holes from 1945. A train emerged from underground as it approached Alexanderplatz, and David caught his first glimpse of the TV tower, that communist era needle piercing the sky like a giant's antenna. Tomorrow he'd go up there, see the city spread out below him like a living map of the 20th century's bloodiest chapters. 3 days. 3 days to absorb as much history as possible before moving on to Prague. What David couldn't anticipate was that in less than 18 hours he'd be running through these same streets with trained killers on his trail, that the TV tower would become a landmark he'd use to navigate while fleeing for his life. The Hotel Mita was exactly what David had hoped for: efficient, clean, and utterly German in its attention to detail. The desk clerk spoke perfect English and provided him with a detailed map of the surrounding area, marking the best restaurants and recommending a walking route that would take him past the major historical sites.
This is perfect. Thank you. I'm particularly interested in anything related to the Cold War period.
Then you must visit the DDR Museum, and of course, Checkpoint Charlie. Though I warn you, Checkpoint Charlie has become quite touristy. For something more authentic, try the Berlin Wall Memorial on Bernauer Strasse.
David nodded enthusiastically, pocketing the map and heading for the elevator. Room 412, 4th floor, facing the courtyard. Exactly the kind of quiet, unremarkable accommodation that would normally guarantee a peaceful night's sleep. Instead, it would become the site of his first real taste of the violence that was closing in around him. In his room, David unpacked methodically, hanging his clothes in the narrow wardrobe and arranging his toiletries in the bathroom with the same careful organization he brought to everything in his life. He plugged in his phone charger, connected to the hotel's Wi-Fi, and sent a quick message to his sister back in Manchester. Berlin is incredible already. The history here is overwhelming. You can feel it in the air. Tomorrow, I'm gonna walk the length of where the wall used to be. 4 blocks away, Anya Volkov sat in a rented Audi, watching the hotel entrance through high-powered binoculars. She'd already identified the service entrances, the fire exits, and the most likely escape routes. Her partner was positioned with overwatch on the building's rear courtyard. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Wait until the target was asleep, enter through the service corridor using credentials that the FSB had acquired months ago from a corrupted hotel employee in Munich, search the room thoroughly, and extract both the target and whatever he was carrying. If David cooperated, he might live long enough to be interrogated properly. If he resisted, the operation would become significantly messier, but the outcome would be the same. David spent the evening exploring the neighborhood around his hotel, marveling at the way Berlin wore its history, like layers of paint. Each era visible beneath the surface, never quite erased. He found a small restaurant near the Spree River and ordered schnitzel and a local beer. Sitting outside despite the October chill, watching the city's lights reflect off the dark water. This is exactly what I needed. No deadlines, no meetings, no one depending on me for anything. Just history and good food and the freedom to wander. It would be his last peaceful meal for a very long time. As David returned to his hotel just after 10 p.m., pleasantly tired and already planning the next day's itinerary, the FSB surveillance team received their final orders. The waiting was over. In 6 hours, when the hotel was at its quietest, they would move. David brushed his teeth, changed into pajamas, and settled into bed with his Kepler biography, completely unaware that in the darkness outside, professional killers were synchronizing their watches and checking their weapons one final time. Tomorrow would bring violence, terror, and the shattering of every assumption David had ever made about the safety of the modern world. But tonight, for a few more Chapter 4. The sound that woke David at 3:47 a.m. wasn't subtle. It was the sharp crack of his hotel room door being kicked open, the security chain snapping like a guitar string under the force of professional brutality. For a moment, David's mind refused to process what was happening. He sat up in bed, blinking in the sudden flood of hallway light, his brain still wrapped in the fog of deep sleep. Then he saw the silhouettes, 2 figures moving with predatory precision into his room.
What the hell? Who are you? This is my room.
The first intruder was a woman, compact and deadly, wearing dark tactical clothing. She moved like water, fluid and purposeful, her eyes scanning the room with the systematic attention of someone who had done this many times before. The second was larger, a man who positioned himself by the door while his partner began methodically tearing the room apart.
Where is it? Her English was accented, but precise. The device, where did you hide it?
David scrambled backward against the headboard, his heart hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. The woman was opening every drawer, every compartment, moving with mechanical efficiency, while her partner kept watch.
Device? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a tourist. I'm on vacation.
A woman paused in her search, studying David with the cold attention of a scientist examining a specimen. She pulled out a tablet, swiped to a photograph, and held it up for him to see.
Schiphol Airport, Terminal 3. Yesterday, 14:27 hours. A man approached you near the departure gate. He made contact.
The photograph showed David clearly, sitting with his coffee, reading his guidebook, and there, barely visible in the background, was a figure David now remembered. The nervous man who had bumped into him, apologized, and hurried away. The man who had seemed so unremarkable that David had forgotten him completely until this moment. Jesus Christ, man who bumped into me, he put something in my jacket. That's what they're looking for. The woman saw the recognition flicker across David's face and smiled, a expression devoid of any warmth.
Good. You remember now. So let's try again. Where is it?
David's mind raced. His jacket, the one he'd worn on the plane, was hanging in the wardrobe. If something had been planted on him, it would still be there.
My jacket, the navy one in the wardrobe. Check the pockets.
The woman moved to the wardrobe with the same fluid precision, her partner never taking his eyes off David. She searched the jacket systematically, outer pockets, inner pockets, even the small ticket pocket near the waistband. Her fingers found something in the inner left pocket, something that definitely hadn't been there when David had packed for his trip. She pulled out a small black object barely larger than her thumb. A USB drive. That man slipped me a fucking USB drive, and now these people think I'm some kind of spy. The woman examined the device briefly, then looked back at David with something approaching approval.
You've been very cooperative. Unfortunately, cooperation doesn't guarantee survival.
The words hit David like ice water. This wasn't a robbery or a case of mistaken identity. These people had found what they were looking for, and now they were going to kill him for having it.
Wait, I didn't know I had that thing. I don't even know what's on it. I'm just a fucking accountant from Manchester.
The woman paused, studying him again. Something in David's genuine terror seemed to give her pause.
Perhaps, but you've seen too much now, and you know too much.
That's when they heard it. Footsteps in the hallway, moving with purpose toward David's room. Not the casual shuffle of a late-night hotel guest, but the measured pace of someone who knew exactly where they were going. The woman's demeanor changed instantly. She gestured sharply to her partner, who moved away from the door and took position behind the bathroom entrance. the woman herself flattened against the wall beside the destroyed doorframe. A voice called softly from the hallway, male, British accent, carefully controlled.
David Morrison? My name is Daniel Hawker. I'm here to help you, but we need to move quickly.
David looked from the woman pressed against the wall to the doorway where this new voice waited. He had no idea who Daniel Hawker was, but the cold professionalism of his current captors suggested that anyone opposing them might be his only chance at survival.
Here, I'm here. These people broke into my room.
The response was immediate and brutal. The woman spun around the doorframe, weapon raised, but Hawker was already moving. The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the confined space, and David saw the woman's partner collapse behind the bathroom door. Hawker appeared in the doorway, a man in his 40s with the controlled movements of someone who had been in situations like this many times before. He was already tracking the woman with his weapon when she dove behind the bed.
Stay down. Don't move.
What followed was a brief, vicious exchange of gunfire that turned David's hotel room into a war zone. The woman was skilled and dangerous, but Hawker had the advantage of position and, apparently, superior training. When the shooting stopped, the woman lay motionless beside the overturned nightstand, and Hawker was checking David for injuries with the efficient concern of a battlefield medic.
Are you hurt? Can you move?
David nodded numbly, his ears ringing from the gunshots, his mind struggling to process the violence that had just erupted around him. This is really happening. People are trying to kill me over something I didn't even know I was carrying. Hawker was already moving, gathering David's scattered belongings with practiced efficiency.
Get dressed. We have maybe 3 minutes before hotel security responds, and I guarantee you don't want to be here when they do.
As David pulled on his clothes with shaking hands, Hawker moved to the window and peered through a gap in the curtains. His expression darkened immediately.
Fuck. There's a van across the street that wasn't there an hour ago. 2 men in the lobby pretending to read newspapers. He turned back to David. How many people knew you were staying here?
Nobody. I booked it online yesterday, paid with my card. He stopped, understanding flooding his face. They can track my card.
Every transaction, every location. You've been broadcasting your position since Amsterdam. He grabbed David's passport from the nightstand. What else have you used? Phone? Email?
David's phone buzzed against the wooden surface, and both men froze. The caller ID showed a Berlin number he didn't recognize.
Don't answer it.
But the phone kept buzzing, the sound unnaturally loud in the aftermath of gunfire. When it finally stopped, it immediately started again. Same number. Then again. They know I'm here. They know I'm alive. They're calling to confirm it.
We go now. Fire escape down to the alley. My car's parked 2 blocks east. He handed David a small earpiece. Put this in. When we're separated, and we will be, I need to be able to reach you.
As David fumbled with the earpiece, Hawker was already at the window, forcing it open with a tool from his jacket. The night air rushed in, carrying the sound of distant sirens.
Police response time in this district is 4 minutes. We've used 3. He swung one leg over the windowsill. Follow my exact path down. Don't look at the ground.
The fire escape was a narrow metal lattice that shook with every step. David's hands were slick with sweat as he gripped the railings, following Hawker's controlled descent through the shadows between buildings. 3 floors down, then 2, the city spreading out below them in a maze of lights and darkness. On the 2nd floor landing, David's foot slipped on a patch of ice-slick metal. For a terrifying moment, he swayed backward over the railing, the alley yawning beneath him. Hawker's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with bruising force.
Focus. Eyes on me, not down there.
When they reached the alley, Hawker immediately pressed David against the brick wall and peered around the corner toward the street. His body language was tense, predatory.
2 more vehicles just arrived. Black sedans, diplomatic plates. This isn't just FSB anymore. They've called in the full team.
FSB? What the hell is FSB?
Hawker's look was grim. Russian foreign intelligence, the people who just tried to kill you upstairs, they were the advanced scouts. What's coming now are the professionals. Russian intelligence. War crimes. People are dying because of something in my pocket. They moved through Berlin's back alleys like ghosts, Hawker leading with the confidence of someone who had memorized every escape route in the city. Behind them, the hotel was now blazing with police lights, but the activity seemed strangely muted. No shouting, no chaos, just efficient movement.
They're containing the scene. Official story will be a gas leak explosion or something equally boring. 2 dead Russians become a maintenance accident.
Hawker's car was a nondescript BMW parked in the shadow of a construction site. As they approached, he suddenly stopped, one hand raised in warning. The sound came from their left, a diesel engine idling in the darkness between 2 buildings. Too regular, too patient. Someone was waiting.
They found the car. His hand moved to his weapon. How the fuck did He stopped, his gaze snapping to David with sudden suspicion.
What else are you carrying? Wallet? Credit cards? David's hand went instinctively to his back pocket, where his wallet bulged with the accumulated debris of travel. Receipts, cards, tickets. And there, pressed against his driver's license, a small black disc he'd never seen before.
There's something here. Something that isn't mine.
Hawker took the disc, his expression darkening as he examined it. RFID tracker, military grade. They've been following you since Amsterdam, probably since the airport. The dead man, when he bumped into me, he didn't just give me the USB. He marked me for death. The sound of running footsteps echoed from multiple directions now, north, south, and behind them. The net was tightening with professional precision.
New plan. He crushed the tracker under his heel and grabbed David's shoulder. We split up. You take the S-Bahn to Alexanderplatz, then the U-Bahn to Potsdamer Platz. There's a safe house above the electronics shop on Stresemannstrasse. Number 47, 3rd floor, apartment C.
I can't. I don't know Berlin. I don't speak German.
You can and you will. Because if they take you alive, they'll torture you for information you don't have, and then they'll kill you anyway. He pressed a key into David's palm. 1 hour. If I'm not there in 1 hour, you run.
Before David could protest further, Hawker was gone, melting into the shadows with the fluid movement of a predator. The footsteps were closer now, organized, methodical. Alone, in a foreign city, with killers hunting me. David ran through Berlin's late-night streets with the desperate energy of prey, the USB drive a burning weight in his pocket. Behind him, he could hear the systematic search beginning, car doors slamming, radios crackling, the efficient sounds of a manhunt in motion. The S-Bahn station appeared like salvation, its fluorescent lights and late-night commuters offering the illusion of normalcy. But as David descended the steps, he couldn't shake the feeling that every face in the crowd might be watching him. Every casual glance might be reconnaissance. 1 hour, 60 minutes to reach safety, Chapter 6. The S-Bahn car lurched into motion, carrying David deeper into Berlin's underground arteries. Through the scratched window, the tunnel walls blurred past in a hypnotic rhythm that did nothing to calm his racing pulse. Every passenger became a potential threat. The businessman reading his phone, the woman with the oversized handbag, the teenager whose eyes seemed to follow him too intently. How many of them know? How many are watching? Alexanderplatz station rose around him like a concrete cathedral, its brutalist architecture offering no comfort. David emerged into the main concourse, immediately overwhelmed by the maze of signs pointing in directions he couldn't read. The U-Bahn entrance beckoned from across a sea of late-night travelers, each one a potential FSB operative.
Potsdamer Platz. Potsdamer Platz. He repeated it like a mantra, fighting through the crowd with the USB drive seeming to burn through his jacket pocket.
The security cameras tracked his movement with mechanical precision, black domes that could hide any number of watchers. David pulled his hood up, knowing it was probably useless. If they'd been tracking him since Amsterdam, they already had facial recognition locks on him. Behind him, footsteps echoed with a rhythm that seemed too deliberate, too measured. David risked a glance back and caught sight of a man in a dark coat, hands in his pockets, maintaining exactly the same distance. When David stopped to check the platform signs, the man stopped to check his phone. They're still following me. Even without the tracker, They're still following me. The U-Bahn platform stretched ahead like a fluorescent-lit tomb. David positioned himself behind a support pillar, watching the tunnel mouth for any sign of an approaching train. The man in the dark coat had vanished, but that only made things worse. Now he could be anywhere. When the U6 finally arrived, David waited until the doors began to close before darting aboard. Through the closing gap, he saw the dark coat man emerge from behind another pillar. Too late to board. Small victories. Potsdamer Platz station spat him out into the heart of modern Berlin, where glass towers reached toward a sky that had turned the color of old bruises. Dawn was still hours away, but the city's pulse had already begun to quicken. David oriented himself using the distant silhouette of the Sony Center, then began the hunt for Stresemannstrasse. Number 47 turned out to be a narrow building wedged between a doner kebab shop and a store selling vintage electronics, the kind of place that existed in the gaps between Berlin's more glamorous districts. David circled the block twice, checking for watchers before approaching the entrance. The stairwell smelled of industrial disinfectant and decades of cigarette smoke. David's footsteps echoed in the confined space as he climbed to the third floor, each step bringing him closer to either safety or another trap. Apartment C sat at the end of a dimly lit hallway, its door identical to all the others, except for the small scratches around the lock that suggested frequent use. The key turned smoothly, and David stepped into a space that felt more like a storage unit than a home. Sparse furniture, blackout curtains, and the kind of impersonal cleanliness that suggested regular but temporary occupation. This was a place for hiding, not living.
37 minutes. He checked his watch, amazed he'd made it with time to spare.
David positioned himself by the window, peering through a gap in the curtains at the street below. The electronics shop was dark, its display windows filled with the ghostly glow of standby lights. A few early commuters had begun to appear, but none of them showed the telltale signs of surveillance. No loitering, no repeated passes, no coordinated movements. Where the hell is Hawker? 53 minutes. 57. David's watch seemed to be moving faster now, each tick bringing him closer to a decision he wasn't prepared to make. At 59 minutes, he allowed himself to hope. At 60 minutes and 30 seconds, hope began to curdle into dread. Footsteps in the stairwell, measured, confident, taking the steps two at a time. David moved away from the window, his hand instinctively going to the door handle. The footsteps stopped outside apartment C. 3 quick raps, a pause, then 2 more. The pattern Hawker had described during their brief conversation in Prague.
Thank Christ.
But when David opened the door, it wasn't Hawker standing in the hallway. It was a woman in her 40s, blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a business suit that looked expensive, even in the dim hallway light. Her smile was professional and utterly cold.
Mr. Coleman, my name is Sarah Chen. I'm with the British Embassy. We need to talk.
Embassy? Or MI6? And how the fuck does she know my name?
I'm waiting for someone.
Daniel Hawker won't be coming. He's been detained by German federal police on suspicion of weapons trafficking. You have 2 choices, Mr. Coleman. You can come with me to the embassy, where we can discuss your situation in safety, or you can wait here for the FSB team that's currently surrounding this building.
As if summoned by her words, David heard the unmistakable sound of car doors closing in the street below. Multiple vehicles, multiple occupants. The net was tightening again.
They found you the same way we did. Facial recognition from the U-Bahn cameras. You have approximately 3 minutes before they breach this building.
Trust the woman who might be MI6? Or face the Russians who definitely want me dead? The sound from the street confirmed Sarah's warning. David grabbed his jacket and stepped into the hallway, following the woman who claimed to represent salvation, but felt more like another predator in an increasingly crowded field.
Lead the way.
As they descended the back stairs toward what Sarah promised was an embassy car, David couldn't shake the feeling that he was trading one form of captivity for another. The USB drive in his pocket had become more than evidence. It was a curse that turned everyone around him into either an enemy or a liar. How many people have to die before the truth comes out? And will I be one of them? Chapter 7. The system closes. The embassy car was a black BMW with diplomatic plates, its engine already running when Sarah led David through the building's rear exit. The driver, a thick-set man with the posture of ex-military, didn't acknowledge them as they slipped into the back seat.
Keep your head down until we're clear of the district.
David crouched low, watching through the tinted windows as they pulled away from the curb. 3 black SUVs were parked at strategic points around the building. Too coordinated to be coincidental. Too obvious to be anything but a message. The FSB wasn't hiding anymore.
They wanted me to see them, didn't they? The Russians. They want me to know I can't run anymore.
Psychological pressure is a standard tactic. Make the target feel hopeless, and they'll accept any offered solution.
Even the solution you're offering. Berlin flowed past the windows, a city rebuilt from rubble, its scars hidden beneath modern glass and steel. David wondered if his own scars would be buried as efficiently.
You still haven't told me who you really work for.
I work for people who want to resolve this situation with minimal collateral damage.
The phrase hung in the air like smoke. Minimal collateral damage. David had watched enough news to know what that meant. Acceptable losses, strategic sacrifices, the greater good trumping individual lives. Sarah's phone buzzed against the leather seat. She glanced at the screen, her expression tightening almost imperceptibly.
We have a complication.
Let me guess. Hawker escaped German custody.
How did you? She stopped herself, studying David with new interest. You're more perceptive than your files suggested.
File. They've been watching me longer than I thought. The car turned onto Unter den Linden, heading toward the embassy district. But instead of the reassuring sight of the British flag, David saw police barriers and flashing blue lights surrounding the embassy building.
That doesn't look like business as usual.
There was an incident. Someone attempted to breach embassy security approximately 40 minutes ago.
40 minutes ago, right around the time Hawker should have been arriving at the safe house, David felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Berlin winter.
You used me as bait. The whole thing, the safe house, the meeting time, you leaked it to draw Hawker out.
Daniel Hawker is operating without sanction. He's compromised half our European network with his rogue operation. Sometimes containment requires.
Containment? He saved my fucking life. The driver's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, but he kept his focus on the road. Professional indifference to the moral complexity playing out in his back seat.
And now he's threatening the lives of dozens of other assets. The evidence you're carrying isn't just about Russian war crimes, Mr. Coleman. It contains intelligence that could expose British operations across 3 continents.
A list of compromised Western officials. Some of them must be ours. Static crackled from the driver's radio, followed by a burst of coded transmission. Sarah leaned forward, listening intently.
Take the next right. We're not going to the embassy.
Where are we going?
Somewhere more secure. The embassy is compromised until we can determine how Hawker penetrated our perimeter.
The BMW turned into a quieter district, away from the government buildings and tourist attractions. The architecture here was older, more residential, the kind of neighborhood where secrets could be buried beneath layers of bureaucratic discretion. There is no embassy meeting. There never was. They pulled into an underground garage beneath a nondescript office building. The driver activated a remote control, and heavy steel doors closed behind them with mechanical finality.
This is a secure facility. You'll be debriefed here, and then we can discuss your options.
I want to call the real embassy. I want to verify your credentials.
I'm afraid that won't be possible. For security reasons, this facility operates under communication blackout protocols.
2 men in suits emerged from a side door as the car stopped. They moved with the same professional competence as Sarah, polite, efficient, implacable. David recognized the type from every spy film he'd ever seen, except this time he was the one being handled. This is where it ends, not with bullets or car chases, but with paperwork and official denials. David allowed himself to be escorted from the car through sterile corridors that smelled of disinfectant and institutional authority. The USB drive in his pocket felt heavier with each step, its weight a reminder of all the lives that had been lost to protect its contents.
What happens to the evidence?
It will be evaluated by the appropriate committees. If actionable intelligence is confirmed, proper channels will be notified.
Proper channels, appropriate committees, the language of institutional burial, where inconvenient truths went to die in committee rooms and classified filing cabinets. I stopped at a door marked only with a number, 247. Sarah used a keycard to unlock it, revealing a small room with a table, 2 chairs, and a recording device already set up and waiting.
Someone will be with you shortly to begin your debriefing. I'd recommend full cooperation, Mr. Coleman. It's the fastest path to resolution.
As the door closed behind her with an electronic click, David sat in the chair facing the recording device and realized that Daniel Hawker had been right about one thing. The truth was a luxury that intelligence services couldn't afford. They're going to bury it all. The war crimes, the compromised officials, Hawker's sacrifice, all of it disappeared into the machinery of national security. Outside, Berlin continued its daily routine, unaware that in a basement room marked 247, the last witness to an inconvenient truth was about to be officially silenced by the very people who claimed to serve justice. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, ring the bell, and tell your friends about my listening library.